We're at Big Twin BMW and I forgot my socks, so I was able to go in, buy a set of socks, so I'm ready for the Idaho BDR.
Paul Gillian is the grand poobah, the big cheese. Paul is the ringleader. He's a good one to have along to make a decision.
Paul's the guy to kind of kick us in the ass and say, hey, guys, start your engines.
Well, we've got a lot of sponsors that help us make this happen, and so we're putting stickers on the bikes to make sure they're represented in the film and make sure everybody knows that these brands and these companies support the Backcountry Discovery Routes.
They pack newspaper in all the leaks. I like it.
T. Myers, old Tom Myers. He is the mad scientist in the group. He thinks about things in ways that no one else does.
Tom is really good at wheelies, and I wish he'd do some more for the camera.
2 years in the making. Here we go.
So Bryce has been working on the Idaho BDR for 2 years. He buys up all these maps, tapes them together in his basement, uses highlighters, and just really goes after this.
My wife just laughs. I look at maps so often, and I have piles and piles and racks of maps.
My job is to sweep our group, and I'm also our medic on the group.
T-Bobby Robbie is usually the leader. He's usually the one out front organizing, and on this trip he was the sweep, and I think he really enjoyed that role.
Rob is, I call him the Eagle Scout of adventure. He's got everybody's bases covered.
My name is Justin Bradshaw. I'm the owner of Butler Motorcycle Maps.
Justin Bradshaw. That guy is the biggest clown I've ever had the experience of riding with.
He can walk into a store, pick up a bunch of food, and make a fantastic meal. I'm John Beck. I'm the photographer for the Idaho Backcountry Discovery Routes.
John Beck, the world's most interesting man. He's our photographer and has been, and I just can't imagine doing this without him.
I came to Idaho and rode almost the entire BDR 2 weeks before the filming.
Idaho BDR, second time in 1 month.
Sterling is an amazing guy because he's quiet behind the camera and he's riding probably more than any of us.
There are BDRs and there's the Idaho BDR.
Bill is the newcomer on this trip. He's got a lot of knowledge about Idaho. He's got a lot of really fun stories and knows a lot of people here, and it's really neat to have someone like him along.
He knows the state really well. He's ridden more miles than just about anybody on a big bike in this state. And he knows a lot of people. It's unbelievable how many people he knows in every town we stop at.
The remoteness of what we're doing and what everybody will experience with the Idaho BDR is pretty incredible. This is a showcase of deserts and rivers and streams and mountains and wildlife and people.
I've done the planning and the scouting for the last 3 BDRs, and it's a lot of work. And I don't think people really understand how much work it takes to plan these routes out.
Well, the first challenge we faced with Idaho was going east or west of the mountains. There's a big spine down the center of the Rocky Mountains in Idaho that is filled full of wilderness areas. These are roadless areas, can't ride them. We decided after a long debate to go on the west side, and I'm glad we did. This route is unbelievable. There are a lot of great towns along the west side of the mountains that we've connected the dots up with that people are going to discover and really enjoy.
The challenge of this BDR is absolutely going to be trying to stay on time and trying to get it done in the window of time that we have. It's really long. It's like a double BDR. We're not sure exactly how far it's going to be, but somewhere 1,400 miles we're thinking. So that's going to be the key, is to try and not lose time along the way and get it done.
The southern part of the state is very vast. I mean, it's absolutely immense. It's flat, and we had to find a starting point. Jarbidge, Nevada. That was deciding. We looked at a few different starting points, and Jarbidge just wound up being the perfect spot for us to camp at or stay at, and then get ready and embark from.
Jarbidge, Nevada is just south of the Idaho border in Nevada, and it's the start of the Idaho BDR, and I think it's probably the coolest town you could start a BDR in.
You feel like you're pulling up in a western on your horse after being on a big long ride across country, and everybody pulls up to the rail where you typically would tie your horse. The only difference is we're tying up motorcycles.
So Jarbidge, Nevada is a tiny little mining town. There's only 22 inhabitants year-round. They have a little tiny restaurant. They have what almost qualifies as a store, but they call it a trading post. And interestingly enough, half the things in there are not for sale, so that's kind of interesting. But boy, hardy people. They live in this town that's 100 miles away from the nearest grocery store, and it's dirt roads both ways. So it was a really interesting place to start.
So Jarbidge is one of those old mining towns where they discovered gold a long time ago. In fact, at one point there were over 2,000 people living in Jarbidge. And it's kind of hard to imagine because when we roll into town, there's only about 20 people that live there now. How often do you go out?
No oftener than I have.
The entire community comes together every evening for this little happy hour celebration at the local trading post. And it's like an old time ritual that happens every day in Jarbidge. Does that come every day, Beer 30? Is it 7 days a week?
Pretty much.
Yeah. You're here every day?
Yeah.
You live here year round?
Yeah.
Yeah. How many people live here all year?
There were 22 last winter.
So what's everybody do here in the winter time?
Any damn thing we want.
Yeah, that's good.
They come down and grab the beer and sit down and open it up. And we're going to sit here and drink beer.
Jarbidge is where they had the last armed stagecoach robbery in the United States. It was in the teens, like 1916 or somewhere around there, where a stagecoach was robbed. A few people were actually murdered. Money was stolen. They caught the criminals and they were hung later in Idaho. But Jarbidge holds the distinction of being the place where the last armed stagecoach robbery happened in America.
You got to have something to do in the winter to keep from going, stir crazy, or, and then you have to. It's a very cheap place to live because there's no place here to spend your money.
After leaving Jarbidge, the beginning of the road was great. It was this road right along a river, and then it climbed up into a canyon that kind of started to remind me of Utah. It was just grand vistas into a river valley, and then you crested the top of this hill, and it was these 100-mile-an-hour fast, straight dirt roads through just fields, basically. There wasn't vistas as far as the eye can see of just grasslands.
There's something to be said about being on your bike and looking to the right and looking to the left and seeing it go on forever. And it just has a kind of a special beauty that you don't see in the rest of the state. So kind of embrace that when you go across there, because the rest of the trip you're in trees and you don't get a lot of big expansive views. So embrace those wheat fields and the grass field and that vast beauty.
In all honesty, it's not that stunning or unique, but it's fun, and it's a very cool start. You gain a few miles and get comfortable on the bike, and actually it seems like that would be the easiest section, and technically road-wise it is, but within minutes of leaving, or I guess the first hour or two, Tom had hit a really unexpected deep patch of sand and had gone down right in the middle of the road. And luckily I'd slowed down and I pulled out to the side of the road, tried to help him get his bike up, but realized someone could be flying down this road and just come into this cloud of dust and not know that there's a bike right in the middle of the road. And sure enough, that happened, and it was John Summers, and he saved it. He didn't go down, but it was really, really close. I mean, he was within feet of, crashing into Tom's bike, and it would have ruined the trip for both of them within the first 2 hours. So, the dust is something to consider here for sure.
Glenn's Ferry is interesting and unique because It was where one of the most difficult sections of the Oregon Trail was. As the pioneers headed west over the mountains, they had to cross a lot of rivers, and the Snake River was one of the big challenging rivers that they had to cross, and they chose Glenn's Ferry to do it because there's a series of islands in the middle of the river, so the pioneers were able to take their wagon trains and hop from island to island to get across the Snake River. It was still really difficult and challenging, and their mules and their oxen and their wagons would all, often be swept down river. But today it's really interesting to go through Glenn's Ferry and stop at the Interpretive Center and learn a little bit about the history of the Oregon Trail through this part of Idaho.
Glenn's Ferry to Anderson Reservoir is kind of when you're starting to climb into the mountains. You got a little gravel road, but you're starting to anticipate what the rest of the trip is like. So it's kind of, you're kind of saying, okay, now we're getting into what I think Idaho is.
You start to gain a little bit of elevation, and you start to feel like, you're getting out of the grassland and farmland, start getting into the foothills.
Yeah, John Summers from Climb, man that's behind supplying the gear that we were using for this trip. Neat guy. Unfortunately, he had an accident right on day one.
I didn't see anything. I just came up and he was laying on the ground. That's it.
He immediately told me, my leg is broken, my leg is broken. And Tom was great at knowing exactly where we were and calling the ambulance and getting him on the way.
No, it just spun completely around.
Gotcha.
And then my leg got caught going backwards when I was going forward.
I had to take scissors and actually cut his Climb pants off. And I asked him first, I said, "You sure you want me to cut these off?" And I said, "Oh, hell, you don't need to answer that. You can just get another set."
It's definitely broke. Broke real well. There's a lot of rolled up gravel roads here. That's the start of it. So you got to get your wits about you in that first section, because you're going to have many hundreds of miles more of that type of road.
Last year this time, I did the same thing. I made a mistake, crushed my lower leg, and ironically it's our lower left legs. I know what he's going through. It's not going to be fun, and one thing I need to tell him is that they're not going to let him drink any more water. So he might want to take some sips right now. But he's got some morphine ahead of him and a tough night.
2 years in a row. The curse of the BDR.
Slow is the new fast for everyone. I don't want to have to bring out my medical kit twice in one day. You hear that, Bradshaw? I don't want to have to bring it out twice in one day.
That's the new slow.
They told me they're out of helicopters, so.
The route over Bennett Mountain is treeless for the most part and has a lot of distant views. So as you leave Glenn's Ferry and head up over towards the reservoir, so you crest over some foothills and you're starting to get into the Rocky Mountains of Idaho after that.
You end up at the rim of a canyon, looking down on the reservoir. You ride over a cool dam and start to feel like you're making some progress and getting into the mountains.
Anderson Ranch Reservoir is a really cool place to ride because you come in from above and you can look down and see the dam down below, and then know that you're actually going to cross over the little dam. And we get to ride along the side of Anderson Reservoir for about 20 miles, where there's cliffs just going down to the water. It snakes in and out. It's like you're in an Idaho version of Norwegian fjords.
This is a great road that just winds along the lake, straight edge down to the water everywhere. Lots of boaters out. Looks like they're having lots of fun.
What I wouldn't give to go get in the lake and go swimming right now.
Pine is at the north end of the reservoir, and there's a little convenience store, gas station. You have to fill up in Pine.
It's our last stop for fuel and food. Day one of the Idaho BDR. We're just about 30 miles maybe away from Trinity Lakes, where we're going to camp this evening.
Now we're going to the mountains. We're going to get out of this hot desert area
and head into one of the nicest campgrounds on the whole route, Trinity Lakes Campground.
There's a side road that goes up to the lakes, campgrounds, and then also continues up to the lookout, which I highly recommend as well.
You get up to Trinity Lakes, and it's a series of like 5 or 6 lakes nestled up in the heart of the mountains, and it's a really wonderful place for the first evening of camping on the Idaho BDR.
We got here right at sunset. We were able to jump in the lake, take a little bath, clean up, and we're ready for a bonfire and to make dinner and hopefully have a good evening.
The Idaho BDR, for the most part, is a fairly moderate to easy route, but we do have some side trips that are pretty challenging. One of them being the trip up to Trinity Mountain.
The lookout is accessible only to motorcycles and hikers, so you come to a gate and you can't take a four-wheel drive up there, which immediately is very cool, in my opinion.
Well, the road looks pretty steep, so I'm taking off the things that are easy to come off, and we're going to try and ride to the top. It looks pretty steep and technical, but I think I can make it.
It's definitely an advanced route. It's loose, it's steep. It's not for everybody, but it's totally doable on an adventure bike.
It was hard for us, and we're pretty experienced riders, so I would recommend that people either walk the route up to Trinity Summit or send their most experienced rider ahead to scout.
There's a few tight switchbacks, which you don't see from the gate, but terrain-wise, it's that kind of high exposure, loosey rock road.
It's 9,500 feet elevation. There's a fire lookout here. We were able to get the big bikes up here with panniers on, and a little bit of work. It wasn't too bad.
Apparently we're the first group ever to come here on street legal bikes, and not that many bikes come up here, period.
Probably the first ones with full luggage up here too as well.
You're also the first with any luggage.
Yeah.
This is a pretty serious lookout, Trinity Mountain Lookout. It's probably important to note that there's a lot of these lookouts still in the state of Idaho. I bet there's 40 or 50 of them in the state left.
So this outhouse is at 9,500 feet. It's got quite a view from the toilet.
Well, this is probably the high point of the Idaho Backcountry Discovery Route. If not, it's got to be one of the highest points. We're over 9,000 feet. You can see the lakes down below where we camped last night. Now we're going to head back down and continue north towards Deadwood Reservoir for this evening.
So day 2 for us was the area from the Trinity Lakes camping area all the way up to Deadwood Reservoir.
I call this section of the route Rivers and Roads because that's what you're going to be seeing as you ride from Trinity Lakes up to Deadwood Reservoir. You just go down and up a lot of forest roads over creeks and bridges pretty much all day long. You're riding in the woods, up hills, down hills, across creeks, and next to rivers.
Probably my favorite day of riding. Just thinking about the actual track and riding on the bike and having a great time. And in there are some tracks that are so fun to ride. Keeping in mind that, you know, when you're riding like that, you're not watching the scenery. This is just pure riding joy.
It got a little deep. I wasn't expecting that. So we got to go up again then.
We have to go up. We'll come out of here. We'll go up to a summit, and then we're going to take a left. And this is a very fun road that drops, slowly descends down to Deadwood Reservoir.
The ride into Deadwood was a slog. It's a really twisty, loose dirt, smooth road. and it seemed to go on for miles. It took us a long time.
That was a long ride on a twisty road. It was a fun road though.
The ground got soft. I somehow got sideways and pitched off the bike in second gear, and I broke the windscreen. And I entertained Justin Bradshaw, which is the most important thing.
I'm still laughing. It was really funny the way you pirouetted off it. I'm really glad you didn't get hurt, but
yeah, me too. My back's a little sore, but
I'm whipped. I'm going to set up my tent right there. I'm going to get in the lake and get cleaned up, and then I'm going to bed. See you tomorrow.
Grueling day, and it's only day 2 of about 8 or 9 days.
yeah.
You would never guess there's a beach in the mountains of Idaho.
Always good having water on a BDR.
Yeah, and this lake is a lot warmer than most creeks and rivers are. So this is kind of a nice luxury. Not to mention the beach and the view and just this setting. So yeah, this is nice. The area from Deadwood Reservoir north up to the town of Yellow Pine is pretty much a straight line. A lot of wide open gravel roads in there. There's a few areas that deviate from the track, but it's just a mountain valley where you're just kind of hammering through and trying to get up to Yellow Pine.
We're up in this high avalanche country. In the wintertime, this area is going to be covered in snow. In the summer, it's beautiful, but it's cold out when you're going down the road. So I'm going to put on some extra layers here before we go any further. Now I am going to be nice and snug and warm for the road ahead.
Yellow Pine is one of the communities that I think really add to the flavor of the Idaho BDR, really make it special, you know, because these are the tiny, off the beaten path places that on a map you see a name and it doesn't really tell you the story of the town. It could be big, it could be small. And all these towns that we've gone to are really small. They are just little, old, historical, in most cases mining or logging towns. I was impressed by the hospitality of everybody there and just the kind of the charm. It's just a one-street town, but the charm is spectacular.
It's a hidden gem. It's nice. It's quiet. There's no people. Just kind of a perfect place to be, especially in the summertime.
I have 2.7 gallons. The best mileage of all the KTMs.
Well, I don't know if I'd go with best mileage. I'd just say you're not romping on it as much as the others are.
Dang it! Who told you to say that? Did these guys? Yes.
16 even. I wasn't gonna say so. I was gonna say riding kind of like a woman, but it's all right.
Oh, ouch!
We've been picking on them for 4 days. It's about time someone else did.
We rolled in, we had lunch in a really neat restaurant. Bill had a couple friends come in, he knew the locals, so it was really neat to see that interaction.
These guys are really good friends of mine. So this is John Otter and this is Pete Henderson.
Hello.
And they came over from McCall today. They're actually going back the same way we came. So.
You should take the time to talk to the people there because they're really excited about the Backcountry Discovery Route coming through there. They're really excited about sharing their town with you and helping you out.
Today there's like 32 permanent residents that live in Yellow Pine. It's a small place. They have a great harmonica festival every year in early August. So if you can time your BDR trip to pass through Yellow Pine in the beginning of August, you can check out the harmonica festival, which is really cool.
You guys want some lemonade?
Oh, we just ate lunch and fueled up, and we're heading off. We're filming.
Where are you going?
We're filming a documentary for the Idaho Backcountry Discovery Route.
It's like you're in Hollywood.
Yeah, we're pretending we're in Hollywood.
Yeah. Why would you recommend that motorcyclists come out of their way to go to Yellow Pine?
The Yellow Pine? It's a little gem. A little gem in the middle of nowhere. Plus, I'll fix you dinner.
I have to say, the people in Idaho that we've met so far have been really nice. I mean, the people have been fantastic. I think I just can't say enough about how gracious and warm and welcoming and inviting they've all been. I mean, this lady was offering to make us dinner and lemonade. It's been a great experience getting to know the folks out here, and especially in the rural Idaho.
Well, that was something. We're We're quite the celebrity in this town.
So we're just east of McCall. We've still got probably 900 miles to go, maybe 1,000, but looking at the map feels like we're making okay time.
Turn me loose, set me free, somewhere in the Idaho mountains. Give me all I got, come into me.
So when you leave Yellow Pine, you're heading north up to Big Creek, and that road was put in 1933 for the mining industry. And Big Creek itself is interesting because there's an airstrip up there where a plane comes in with the mail. They drop off the mail, and then a local resident drives around and delivers mail to people that live in this remote part of Idaho.
Remote in Idaho is a whole different term relative to what you might think remote in other states. We only have 1.2 million people in the state of Idaho, and then the rest of this state is wilderness and backcountry.
Okay, we're finally in the alpine region of the Idaho BDR. Cool alpine climates, twisty roads that are still kind of damp, very tacky.
One of the cool things you can see on the road to Warren is the summit, Elk Summit. It's a little optional side trip. It's less than a mile, but after going up 3 or 4 switchbacks, you get up to the top of Elk Summit where you have a 360-degree view of the surrounding mountains, and it's really cool.
The scenery has been amazing. We've got great weather, and it feels good to be way up here above the crowds on top of a mountain.
Yeah, the area north of Yellow Pine is probably the best part of this ride. And the reason is you're going through these incredible valleys. You've got the roads the roads go through a lot of transitions. Sometimes they're very tricky and rocky, and other times they've been graded and treated and they're in good shape. But just take your time, take extra time through there as you're budgeting time on your trip. You're going to want to stop and take a lot of pictures along that route.
We're coming down this steep grade, and there are signs that say abrupt edge, and it is abrupt. It's just a square edge, and maybe 100 feet down, and it was very strange to ride next to those. I just kind of felt like I was drawn toward it, and I had to make sure I stayed away from it.
I think we were by one of the forks of the Salmon River, and it was beautiful. And then we had to climb up this grade. It just went on and on and on. It was pretty cool, but it went straight up, not straight up, but switched back up, and very, very abrupt edge. And I'm not real keen on heights, and so it was really kind of thrilling. And then you drop into Warren, and Warren was really a neat little town, an old mining town, and one that definitely had some character at one point, and it looks like they're kind of rebuilding that a little bit, and it was a neat place to go.
This is a cool old town. Looks like an old mining town. It's got these vintage log buildings, and we got a hotel, dance hall. We've got the bomb shelter over here. I guess that's a local watering hole. Really cool place to roll through.
So Warren's an old mining town, and it's north of McCall by, I'm guessing, someplace around 65 miles. And it gets quite a lot of snowmobile traffic in the winter. There's a little airstrip here for backcountry pilots, and a lot of ATV, dirt bike, adventure bike traffic comes through here.
It's kind of mind-boggling. These people live out here in these tiny little communities, and that's, I think, what's part of the character of the Idaho BDR that's different than the other BDRs.
I'm a third-generation underground gold miner. Grew up right here, but the EPA and everybody's kind of shut the mining down. There's so much red tape, you can't hardly mine no more. So more into the timber services now, doing a little bit of logging and whatnot. And
you can't get much more beautiful in this country. And the river over here, lady over here, the river's like 40 foot from her house, so it's a beautiful place to have coffee, you know. It's just wonderful country.
Bergdorf is one of the most charming little places I've been. It's a historic site. It's on the National Register. It's been there since 1870. They've got rustic cabins, and they've got these old trucks, like 30s, you know, pickup trucks parked in front of the cabins in the weeds. It was really photogenic, just a beautiful place, and a great little place to rest after a day of riding.
Welcome to our cabin. This is like what Ma and Pa from Little House on the Prairie would live in.
You know, no electricity, no running water. Bring your own sleeping bag in, set it down.
I like the style of Bergdorf Hot Springs. You know, everything's handmade or old or both.
Done by hand. Look at these logs, they're squared off.
Bergdorf has got to be the highlight of the trip for sure. It's just really, really cool to have a historical site like that that's kept up. The people who run it are exceptionally nice. It has more charm than you can imagine. So it's just really cool to step back in time like that. And then of course to be able to end a long day's ride by soaking in a hot spring it's unbelievable.
Oh, that's nice. You can't beat this, that's for sure.
Woo! Oh, yes. We had a wonderful experience with this fantastic hot spring. The couple that run the hot spring, they were wonderful. They went way out of their way for us, and we got to have the full Bergdorf experience.
It is probably my favorite overnight spot on any BDR so far.
Well, right now you can hear the motorcycles pulling up. We're getting ready to fuel up, and we're going to get going. I'm going to win the fuel mile challenge.
And why is that?
Because I ride like a girl. And no offense to you girls who ride out there, because I know quite a few adventure girls, and they do quite well. But yeah, how do you answer that?
You better just
I better stop talking right now.
It's day 4 on the road. We've got a really long day ahead of us today. We're going to try to make it to Elk City, which is well over 150 miles away.
Leaving Bergdorf, you are very high up in the mountains, and the only way to get down off that mountain is to take the French Creek grade, which is a long switchbacking road. It's incredible to look at on a map because the switchbacks are literally, the roads are right below each other. It's very easy riding. The hardest part is trying to keep your eyes on the track while you're taking in the views because it's absolutely beautiful.
When you're riding down it and you look just off your shoulder to your right and you can see the road right below you, you know, and how steep it is was impressive.
I think the road's in reasonably good shape, and it drops down into the French Creek, which drops into the Salmon River, one of the most spectacular rafting rivers in the world. On a weekend, you would see just gobs of activity and rafts, tents along the beaches on the river, so it's an exciting place.
The Civilian Conservation Corps constructed the 1-lane Manning steel bridge over the Salmon River in the 1930s. It looks kind of rickety when you first approach it, but it's completely safe for at least one automobile at a time to cross, or in our case, like 8 adventure bikes.
It's mostly level, but the road just kind of swoops and turns and follows the river.
You can get gas in Riggins if you want to. Great town, highly recommended. But depending on your tank size and how far you can travel between gas stations, that's not a critical stop.
We're
gonna have to build a ramp right here.
I feel like we've been pretty lucky with the roads on this trip being open, because it feels like it'd be very easy for tree fall and other things, fires, mudslides, all that, to close them. So people definitely need to be aware that, especially early season, tree fall, mudslides, fire is a really big deal here.
I would recommend that people bring saws and maybe even tow ropes and things that you can pull things out of the way. Just be prepared that you may need to work your way through some of these roads.
I'm a little worried about that tree on the other side.
Peeling a pannier off?
Yeah, I don't want to pull a Bryce.
That was awesome.
I don't have a skid plate on this bike, so high centering and kind of pushing over wasn't really an option. Getting over it isn't the issue, it's this hill on the other side. You don't really want to overshoot your landing, and so I kind of, zigged when I should have zagged. And
This is a cemetery that dates back to the 1860s. I mean, this is one of those real old-time authentic boot hill cemeteries, and it's really cool to take a look at the old wooden gravestones and see how people died back in the day. I mean, you can sit and look at read the different headstones and see, this person died by a gunshot wound, or this person died from exposure. There's a mass grave there where Chinese miners were buried, because during its heyday there were over 3,000 Chinese miners that lived and worked up in the area around Florence, and today it's just an eerie little cemetery up in the forest.
Bergdorf to Elk City was a long day for us. The good news is it concludes with some pavement, which helps you get into Elk City and depending on where you're staying, maybe start the Magruder.
So we get into Elk City, and it definitely underscored Idaho as a hunting state, because every grocery store you go into has a trophy wall with heads on it.
Elk City in its own right is an interesting, literally Forest Service, mining, timber, hunting, small town, but I've always enjoyed coming through Elk City.
There's actually a very, very good grocery store, so you can get everything you need.
You have to stop to get gas, go into the little convenience store, and that's a great place to buy food for really the next 2 days.
It's 5 o'clock. We're going to try to get to Poet Creek Campground tonight, and then spend the rest of the day on the Magruder tomorrow.
We will be heading due east on the Magruder corridor, and we did hear that there is a slide at the far end on the Montana side, and they said that we could expect up to 2-hour delays. So we're going to go ahead and head over there and see what it is.
We're going to come out the other end in Darby, Montana. Between Elk City and Darby, there are no services. You're on your own out there. And I would say that Magruder proper is about 80 miles.
Well, I've been hearing about this Magruder corridor for many years now. Probably been 10 years that I've been salivating to want to get out here and ride this, and I'm finally getting to do it.
I have 700 and something miles on my odometer since we started in Jarbidge, which is the length of some of the other BDRs. So we're just now halfway-ish, and we've already covered the distance of some of our other projects. So this is a massive undertaking.
Idaho's got a tremendous amount of wilderness areas, mountains. They just go forever. You ride through the mountains for day after day after day. And what I was, I think, most surprised about and actually a little bit saddened by was the amount of burned out forest in South Idaho, Central Idaho. They have a lot of forest, but man, it seemed like there was more burned forest than regular forest. And sometimes after a few years and the wildflowers grow up, it has a beauty of its own. It's really unique. But that was a little bit saddened by that, just seeing how much burnt forest there was.
We lucked out and found a really great campsite right on the creek. It was perfect timing for us. You know, we were all tired, and it was just the right place to stop. So
we're gonna have pork chops tonight. We're gonna have a little salad, fresh green salad.
Fortunately, Rob Watt brought along his camp and barbecue, so we just put it together, lit the briquettes, and hopefully we'll be cooking some meat here real soon because we're all starving.
So last night in Elk City, we discovered that the Magruder corridor had been closed. We decided to move forward. Let's press forward. Let's go on and move toward the slide area. It was closed because of a slide, and we chose to take our chances. But there's a little bit of anxiety when you think about, are we going to go clear over literally to the other side of this and may have a good chance of being turned back?
For the most part, this route has been pretty easy, not too technical, but it can be challenging if you really want to find those challenges. And the ride up to this little lookout tower here was pretty tough. Very rocky, very steep. We made it up to the top of Burnt Knob Lookout, which is somewhere around 7,000 or 8,000 feet, I'm guessing, and it's an optional side trip up to this lookout.
A lot of this ride's hitting 7,500 to 8,500 feet. This is going to be a later season ride than probably most of the other BDRs. July 1st would be the earliest, the 1st of October would be the latest.
And now the challenge is going to be heading back down from here to get back to the Magruder corridor proper and continue on. We're hoping that we can get through a construction zone without too much delay up ahead, but we don't know, so we'll see what's down the road.
Roads on the Magruder, it was just the most perfect conditions that we were in. It had rained not too long ago. There was no dust on it. The road was just mostly dirt with just enough sand and rocks in it to have traction. Apparently they have just graded it. You can only imagine how difficult it is to get equipment out there and maintain that road, so the conditions could change over the years.
Halfway through Magruder Corridor, we found out it was the site of the Magruder Massacre, which I wasn't aware had happened when another camping group from back in the day was traveling across and was killed off somewhere in those mountains. But that aside, it was actually a really beautiful ride. It was amazing, very long, and apparently usually snowed in, so I think we got really lucky. We didn't hit much weather at all. We've actually been really lucky this whole trip that way, so Magruder Corridor was no different.
I feel like we've been pretty lucky with the roads on this trip being open, because it feels like it'd be very easy for tree fall and other things, fires, mud, slides, all that, to close them. So for us to only have one kind of hiccup in the roads on the Magruder, I think is kind of remarkable.
It looks like it's the same thing as before.
so I don't think they're going to let us get through if we get there before 5 o'clock, and we're set to be there soon. So the work's ongoing. Unless we can negotiate our way through, I think we're stuck for a while.
We were skeptical that we would get through it all. We stopped to talk to a couple people that were heading west and inquiring about whether the road was open. And it wasn't real clear to us whether we'd be turned around, which would have been a really big deal fuel-wise, or whether we'd have to wait all day.
Well, the first time we tried to get through this mess was about 2.5 hours ago, and we came up on a road grader guy who he seemed to be letting us through, which would have been the courteous thing to do. He must have taken it, or we took it the wrong way, and he wound up cutting us off, trapping us, forcing us to turn around in a difficult situation. He was pretty upset, so here we are 2.5 hours later with a mad excavator driver or a grader driver, and we're finally getting through.
I mean, I tried to move over so there was enough room, and the blade just had to move it about a foot the other way. Instead, he moved it a foot this way, so it closed the gap.
No, he
and then he was like,
orders.
Well, it's almost 5. These guys have just finished up their shift. They're going home. They're going to grade this out one more time, and we're going to bike through here. Then we got a long road ahead of us. It's 5 o'clock. We got to go to Darby or Connor and get gas. We're going to head up the highway. This is in Montana, up to the city of Lolo. More gas there, another stop. Then we're going to head over towards Lolo Pass, and hopefully we can make it to the area around Loxa Lodge, where we can gas up one more time before heading up the Lolo motorway. That's 3 gas stops. We need to get groceries along the way. We're already pressed for time. This is going to be a tough trip. The way it works is the Magruder goes into the area around Connor or Darby, Montana, and then a highway snakes north to the area around Missoula at Lolo, and then comes back on the Lolo motorway.
And then, of course, Lolo Pass, getting on Highway 12, that's one of the best roads in the country. It's twisty, it's perfect pavement, it's like a racetrack, so it's very welcome at that point of the trip.
Guess it's time to get up and ride motorcycles.
The Loxa Lodge was great. We had dinner here last night. They let us sleep in the field behind the gas station there. And we just had breakfast. Now we're going to head out on the Lolo motorway.
On this trip, I was lucky enough to be able to invite my cousin, who's a college history professor, to talk to us about Lewis and Clark.
We couldn't find a more important historical area than the Lolo area, both from the Native American standpoint and that of the Lewis and Clark expedition. We'll be ending up at Pierce, Idaho, so it'll be about, I believe, about an 80-mile ride. And what hardships it has for us, it remains to be seen. But we're certainly traveling in finer style than Lewis and Clark, but you can get a good sense of of what they experienced and the sights, sounds, smells, and that sort of thing. So I'm looking forward to it.
So the Lolo motorway is it's a historic route, and today we can ride it on motorcycles. You can drive it in a 4-wheel drive vehicle, and I think people ride it in quads and ATVs as well.
I've been looking forward to the Lolo motorway for years too, because I've been reading a lot of American history about Lewis and Clark's expedition from the plains to the Pacific Ocean. They had to cross over the Rocky Mountains, and the path they used was an old Indian trail. It was the Nez Perce Trail.
This is a very historic route, so they've got interpretive signs all along the way. Or you've got great views looking down off into the mountains in both directions. So highly recommended, very important part of the BDR. The Lolo motorway shouldn't be missed.
It's a great road. It's another forest road with big spectacular views and a lot of trees, but the history along the way is really what makes that road interesting. If you just blaze through, you're missing out. So you really need to take the time, take the whole day to ride Lolo.
As you're riding this, it's got a lot of big embedded rocks. It's for that reason, it's kind of a challenge. You get pinch flat if you're not paying attention to the track, but it's a lot of fun. You're dodging rocks and having a great time.
You're starting to see a little bit more expansive views. We would get up high and the trees would break a little bit and you'd see these just beautiful vistas.
So far, I think the Lolo motorway was one of the highlights for me. I remember distinctly thinking, maybe a third of the way into it, that it reminded me of why I got into riding adventure bikes. It's just the sort of going into the hills and exploring these roads, and simple, nothing too technical, but just really neat views.
Quite a different contrast from the Magruder Corridor. They're both really long stretches of wilderness road, but they have a different character and a different flavor. And I really liked coming into the Lolo motorway, where it was really still forested and green and lush, in contrast to the stark beauty of the Magruder Corridor.
Okay, well, we're going to bring together a meeting of the Rocky Mountain College, which was a name given to a group of fur trappers in the 1820s and 30s who had a bit of learning and gathered in the winter to share high-minded topics. And this is the appropriate group for this. So I dug through my drawers to see what I could find that was consistent with the Lewis and Clark expedition. But Lewis and Clark brought 6 dozen of these as gifts for, in particular, young Indian men. I'll pass it around, you can play it. Just don't hit your teeth. Ah.
That's funny. I was looking through my photos from this trip, and one of my favorite shots is from the Indian post office. I wasn't really expecting a true post office, but I was expecting maybe a foundation from a building or something like that. What is there is a pile of rocks.
These are important places, but the Indians used this to keep track of who had come, who had gone, and so I think it's well worth our stopping and paying a moment of reverence to it.
That was a place that these people who traveled back and forth on the Lolo motorway used to leave notes and signs and communicate that where they were going or what was going on. And so for that reason, it's got the name Indian Post Office. But boy, talk about a viewpoint. It's incredible, a beautiful place. It's probably close to halfway along the route, so it's a good place to stop and eat lunch. And
you know, I can't imagine coming over a hill and then looking at all those mountains and saying, wow, we've still got to go over that after you've just come over 5 hills just to get here. I mean, just looking at it on a motorcycle standpoint, I'd say, wow. And
carrying thousands of pounds of gear.
Yeah, and not going very fast, and saying, it's just incredible what they did.
Pierce is full of some interesting folk, and they seem to be happy and doing their thing and have some community going on. You know, you think, gosh, where are we? We're in the middle of nowhere, and there's this little town, and what are people doing out here? And I don't know the answer to what they're doing, but they're all friendly, and people could not be more excited to see us and ask questions. So I feel that they'll be welcoming to all the adventure bikes that come through.
You'll have to stop there to get gas because the Lolo motorway is a long slog. But they've got a nice grocery store, and you can fill up on provisions and head north.
North of Pierce is pretty grueling. The road is wide and very gravelly, but that was one of the most challenging stretches, I think, for all of us. We were all really tired. You had to keep your wits about you because that rolled up gravel will put you down really, really quick.
What I liked about the road wasn't the road, it was the scenery, because again, things opened up and you could see these beautiful expansive views.
The route eventually crosses over the Grandad Reservoir Bridge. That's a beautiful spot, cool reservoir and nice views.
Once we got out of that gravel, of course, it was the perfect Idaho dirt roads, you know, mixed in with some rock and perfect traction. And when we arrived at the Blue Cabin, it was like heaven.
It's a grueling ride up here. You come around the corner and you go, oh my gosh, that looks like the Four Seasons. It's first come, first serve. There's no charge, but we need to leave it clean and neat and orderly. And it's a special place.
More like a good quality Ramada Inn versus the Four Seasons.
It'll do.
But it'll do. Problem is, a couple guys are gonna have to bunk together.
Justin and Rob can just share a twin bed, I think, so we can get, Justin wants to be Big Spoon.
He's gonna be the big spoon, I'm the little spoon? Oh, great. Yeah.
Rainy day on the BDR. It's not what I was looking forward to, but sometimes you got to do it.
If we could leave it in as good or better condition than we found it, we should do that.
So as you drop into Avery, you come into it's a valley, of kind of a rocky river valley. The St. Joe River passes through there.
It was just beautiful, fast, kind of in and out of the trees down into Avery, which was an old mining town and a train depot or a train hub for a lot of the mining that went on back there. And that was really a very interesting stop. And the museum's worth the stop. Go inside there, it's right next door to the train.
My favorite part of the Idaho BDR is honestly the small places that you visit along the way that you maybe wouldn't have otherwise gone to. And Avery is one of those places, so take the time to stop and check out the train and get a little glimpse of what it was like to travel across the country in the 50s.
Right when you leave Avery, there's two roads that you get to pick from. And I took the upper road that went through all these tunnels. I think there's 4 or 5 tunnels that you go through. And one of them, the very first one you go through, is really long. And I was like, whoa, this thing, how long is this going to be? Because it's a curve. And it was cool. But I'd recommend doing one and then turning around and going and doing the other. Do them both because you're going to get a different experience in each one.
We took the low road, which is another ATV and motorcycle only trail. So a beautiful 2-track running along the creek, and it was not very long, but it is actually one of my favorite stretches because you have basically 2 single tracks with grass in the middle and the creek, and you can see the road above. And it was only 5 miles or something, but it's a very neat 5 miles.
I think the real challenge to the trip is taking the time to digest the beauty that's around you. You know, when you're looking at 1,500 miles and you want to get it done in a time frame, you tend to rush, you tend to be anxious, you tend to move quickly. I think it's important to make sure that you stop and digest what's happening here in Idaho.
If you're coming in from the south, the town of Wallace appears as you're in a kind of a canyon a little bit, and there's these beautiful Victorian houses that are really well maintained and painted really nice, and it's like, wow, what kind of a town is this? And then all of a sudden you're in this big downtown, not a big downtown, the big downtown compared to all the other towns that we've seen. It's still small, but it's like a town, but every building is immaculate and clean, and you could tell it was a really, really thriving place at one time. And it is still now. It's like what you felt, what maybe the prospectors felt when they come from, miles and miles with their mule or their burro or whatever their ass with them, and they pulled into this big city, and that's exactly how I felt. That's a good way to describe it.
Every building Downtown is on the National Register of Historic Places. They built an interstate highway, I-90, through this town a while ago, and that's why they had to put all the buildings on the National Register, because the interstate was going to go through the downtown and ruin all of these old buildings.
They had to build the interstate above the town because the whole thing is a historical site as I understand it, and I'm really glad they did because there's a lot going on there. It's really neat. A lot of the buildings are very well kept. There's a brewery, there's a restaurant, there's a gas station, there's hotels. It's one of the few towns along the way that, you know, I would think, man, my wife would really like to come here and hang out for an afternoon or a day. You know, you can get a hotel and walk around and have a drink and kind of recharge the batteries, so to speak.
But now we need to go. The guys are lollygagging in there. There's no time for Nobody got time for lollygagging. Nobody got time for that.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
But the route north of Wallace drops into the Coeur d'Alene River Valley, where there's a great cliff jumping spot, very safe, deep pool, which you might see locals jumping off of. So as you go north from the Coeur d'Alene River, you'll be going up over mountains such as Grassy Mountain, and you'll pass by the Spyglass Lookout Tower. These are great places that you should enjoy along the way. Not a lot to see. There are some distant views in there along this section, but for the most part, you're just kind of riding along and making your way.
Finishing the Idaho BDR in a way feels like more of an accomplishment than the other BDRs, not because it was challenging, but it's very, very long. My odometer reads over 1,200 miles right now, and we still have a few hundred to go to the border. My sleeping pad died on night 2. I've been sleeping on the ground for 8 nights now, and we've done a lot of camping. We've had some great meals. We've been very, very fortunate with all the campsites. We've had water, we've had benches, we've had a fire pit pretty much already built. So in that regard, it's been really, really neat. And now we're on the home stretch. I'm ready for, you know, a hot shower, a clean bed, see my wife and kids. It's a long way back for me, a couple thousand miles of riding to get back home. I'm not looking forward to that, but another one in the books. It's really, really great.
I've already got a sense that they think this is one of the most amazing BDRs yet. So I think that this northern part of the state is very different from the southern part. So I'm anxious to see their reaction, you know, how they compare the two. Because it's almost like northern and southern California. They're very different states, and there's just so much to see. You have to kind of try to pick the best out of all the different options, because the roads are endless. I mean, the dirt roads in Idaho, they just go on forever.
Well, we just stopped here in front of the sign that's telling us a little bit about the bears that are in the area, black bears and grizzly bears.
They say to carry a bell to make sure you don't surprise the bears, and also pepper spray. And then when you're exploring the area, if you see bear scat, you can tell if it's a black bear, it generally has berries and that kind of thing in the scat. If it's a grizzly scat, it's got bells in it, and it smells like pepper. So, a little tidbit from Idaho.
So as you leave the town of Clark Fork, you'll go up Lightning Creek, and at the top of this little side loop, there's a waterfall called Char Falls, which is a very quick, easy to stop at point off the road. Check out the falls and head back on the track.
It's an amazing spot. There's probably a 50-foot drop here on this falls, and if you go up a quarter to a half mile upriver, the falls just keep going and cascading down all the way until you get here, and as you can see, there's a hell of a drop off down to that point. So it's kind of a local landmark, and a lot of people drive up here for a picnic. Some people camp. It's just kind of a cool spot to come and hang out. You can go, and there's swimming holes at each fall basically, so you can just keep walking up till you find an empty one, and then, you know, camp out there for the day. So it's a good spot for sure.
The real highlight of this side trip is the Lookout Tower, and the road up to that is rocky, but it's not nearly as rocky as Burnt Knob or the Trinity Mountain side trips. This one is much easier access, has incredible views, and shouldn't be missed. I'd say it's a mile or two out of the way. Definitely worth it if you're going to head up on that track. And then after that, you descend down Trestle Creek into the area around Sandpoint. It feels great. If you've been going south to north, you are going to be exhausted at this point in time, and you're going to be very proud of what you've accomplished. This is a long and beautiful route. You're going to have a lot of memories. When you get to this point, you're going to take in the views, and I hope rest for a little bit, because this is probably your last big important spot along the route as you head up towards Canada.
It's a 360-degree view. It just feels like you can see forever, and it's really a highlight. We were lucky to hit it on a clear day. The weather was perfect, and you could see all the way to Lake Pend Oreille, which is kind of the anchor of this area as a landmark. And it was a great way to look north to Canada and see the last little bit that we had to go, but also look back to see where we've been. Everyone else had a really long trip to get there, you know, almost at that point, I think about 1,300 miles. So it was really kind of a great way to wrap up the journey to that point, and then kick out the rest of the little bit to Canada to end it.
So the final part of the route follows the Kootenay River, beautiful river valley with bucolic setting and farms and barns and lots of things to photograph along the way.
Beautiful views of these farms that had big hay meadows and old big red barns, and you could smell the grass, and you could see the mountains off in the distance. And for days on end, we've been in the trees, and now all of a sudden we've got this just really cool lifestyle that we're seeing in Idaho. Because we crammed a lot of miles in 8 days, which I think this trip really should be a 10 or 12-day trip to really enjoy Idaho, because it's a beautiful state.
Arriving at the Canadian border after over 1,300 miles of dirt roads was exhilarating. You want to get to the end as you get closer, but then after you get to the end, you're kind of still ready to keep going.
It's taken us, 8 days and about 1,400 miles, I think, but that is Canada.
You finish up right next to the border crossing with a restaurant and a bar with very friendly people willing to take care of you after a long trip. So it's a nice place to end and reflect on your accomplishment.
Some great roads, and I'm stoked to be in my backyard, Canada.
BDR number 5 is done. We're in Canada, or at least as close as we can get with these guys with all their guns.
This week I'm an honorary Idahoan.
That's right.
So I can be armed.
It's been a great ride from Nevada to Canada.
It has been an epic trip, and I am ready to take a shower.
There's Canada, eh?
Glad to be here.
We made it to Canada, and that's a wrap.
Testy. Sound all right? Okay, cool.
We're running late, but we always run late.
Tommy, Mr. Smooth.
He's always trying to think of something and what can we do that's different.
Blah, 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 blah. La, 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 la.
I'm waiting for the day where Bryce's bike gets pulled out by a helicopter.
Let me start over again.
T. Bobby Robbie. It wouldn't be the same without T. Bobby Robbie.
Maybe you could use my first take. Justin Bradshaw.
Well, there's barking spiders. I heard one over there. Or did you just step on a squirrel?
He always has something funny to say or do.
When you put my meat in your mouth, I hope you enjoyed it.
John Beck, world's most interesting man.
So the Idaho BDR, it's more fun than snorting huckleberries.
I'll tell you something about Sterling.
He did the Idaho BDR twice in a row. I challenge anybody else to do that.
Always the first set up at camp and the first taken down, so there's something here that I gotta figure out.
Do I have a problem with my face?
Bill Whitaker.
Yes, he's a CEO of a corporation here in Idaho, but you wouldn't know that when you talk to him. He's very down to earth. I would love to have him on every trip.
So I'm Kurt Forget from Black Dog Cycle Works.
He sees the vision for Adventure Market.
Thanks to Kurt. He's been a big part of the team, and it was a lot of fun getting to know him a little better out in the backcountry riding motorcycles.
Okay, I'm Earl Bauer. I've taught history for just about 40 years now.
And it was really great to have a historian on the trip. I wish there was one on every trip.
Yeah, John Summers from Climb was on this trip. You know, glad to have the opportunity to meet the man that's behind supplying the gear that we were using for this trip.